Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Divine and in today's tutorial I'll be showing us how to cut and sew this baby ball dress as we can see here. So if this is what you're interested in, kindly watch to the end and also subscribe to the channel. So firstly, I'm going to be drafting out my pattern and I'll be marking my half length of 9 inches. I'm going to draw out my shoulder line. So from that point, I'll be marking my chest line measurement of 4.5 inches. I'll draw a straight line also. Then I'll be marking my shoulder measurement, which is 10 inches divided by 2. I'll mark that on the chest line and also on the shoulder line. I'll draw out a straight line. Next, I'll be marking out the round body and bust measurements, which is the same. So for kids, their round body is also what we use for their bust since their shape is still straight. So next I'll be coming down from the shoulder by half inch for the shoulder slope, then divide what I have left into 2. Then I'll just be using my free hand to draft out the armhole. Then I'm going in with a neck width of 2 inches and a depth of 2.25. I'll connect the points also. Then I'll be connecting the tip of the neckline to the shoulder slope of half inch. So this is it for our front. That is all we have to do for our front pattern. Next, I'm going to be marking out our yoke and I'll be coming down by 4.5 inches at the center front. I'll be connecting it to the midpoint of the armhole. So this dress is having a yoke, as you can see in the thumbnail. Then for the back pattern, I'll just be extending my lines. Then I'll get a straight line, which will be my center back. I'll mark out my shoulder measurement, which is 5 inches. I'll draw out a straight line. Then next I'll mark my bust measurement of 5.75 and my round body measurement of 5.75. Then I'm going to get my armhole curve, my shoulder slope of half an inch. Then I'll be marking my neckline of 2 by 1 inch. So my neck depth is 1 inch for my back, while the width is 2 inches. I'll connect the neckline to the shoulder slope. Then I'll get my armhole curve at this point. So that's it also for our back pattern. Then I'll also get the yoke. So the yoke is going to be this chest line measurement that we have here. So now I'll be adding seam allowance, sewing allowance around my pattern. As you can see, I added 1 inch on the side and on the zipper side, then half inch around the other sides of my block. Then I'm going to be cutting out the yoke from the main pattern. So these are the fabrics I'll be working with. I have my veil net, I have my lace fabric, I have my satin fabric and my lining fabric. Now I folded my satin fabric into, I'm making use of 2 yards of my satin fabric and I've gone ahead to fold it. And I'm measuring a length of 19 inches. So a length of 18 inches plus 1 inch for folding, has 19 inches. And I said my satin fabric is 2 yards. So this is 2 yards on fold with a length of 19 inches. So then next I'm going to be folding my lace fabric, which is also 2 yards, and I'll be marking out 11.5 inches. I'll mark it, then cut it out. So I'm working with 2 yards of lace fabric also. So this is my 11.5, my lace fabric. Then for my veil net, I'm working with 3 yards of veil net and I'm marking a length of 15 inches plus 1 inch for seam allowance, that's 16 inches. So I have 16 inches of veil net here and I'll be cutting 3 of these. as you can see. So the layers of net I'm going to have is going to be 3 layers of veil net, and each of this layer is 3 yards long. Now I'm going to be opening all the nets together. I'm going to be laying the 3 of them on top of each other, as you can see how I'm doing it. I'll lay the third one now on top. Then I'm going to be sewing the top and the lower part of this veil net from the beginning to the end, and I'll be making use of loose stitches. I'll sew the up and I'll sew the down. I'll sew it all the way so that the 3 layers will become one. I don't want them to flow individually. I want them to be one. So I'm going ahead to cut out my pieces. I've cut 2 pieces of this veil net here for the yoke, and for the back yoke I have 4 pieces. So the net is going to be two pieces each. Then for my satin fabric, I also cut 2 pieces, one for the main fabric and one for the lining. Then I added my 1/2 inch seam allowance on the top of the pattern, and for my back piece also I cut 4, 2 for the lining, 2 for the main fabric, and I cut my lace fabric also. So the first thing I'm going to be doing now, I'm going to be starting with my front yoke. I'll be laying it like this, then I'll be sewing the neckline and the neck depth like so. I'll just sew on it so that it does not move, so that it becomes one. I'll do the same for my back yoke. I'll sew it in place like this so that everything stays together. I won't be turning the neckline because this is going to be a bishop neckline. I'll just be matching on it. So now for my satin fabric, one is going to be my lining and one is going to be my main fabric. So I'm just marking the lining and marking the main fabric. So I'll set my lining piece aside now, and for the main fabric I'm going to open it, making sure the side that is shining faces up. Then I'll be placing my lace on the shining part. Then I'm going to sew all round so that it stays in place. I'll do the same for my back pieces, making sure the shining side faces up. Then I'll place my lace on it and sew all round, making sure the lace lays properly on the satin fabric. So this is what I have done. You can see I made sure the 2 pieces become one, and I've done that. Now I'm going to be turning my front blouse with the yoke. I'll pin it all the way, then sew it with 1/2 inch. Then I'm going to be covering it with my lining, and for the lining I'll make sure the door side faces the lace. So when wearing our dress, the door side is supposed to be the one touching our skin, not the shining side. So the door side is going to be facing the lace. So when we flip it over, the door side will be touching our skin, not the shining side. So I'm going to be turning my back pieces also. I'll sew the yoke to the lace, then cover it up with this lining, making sure the door side of the lining faces the net and the lace. Then I'll sew with 1/2 inch. So I've gone ahead now to hold my veil net in place. You can see that now I have like just one piece, and you can see how thick it is. So now I'm going to be getting the midpoint of this lace fabric. I'm going to notch. After notching, I'll use my chalk to also mark that point so I can see it clearly, so it's bold enough. Then I'm going to be running gathers on this fabric. So from the midpoint to one end of the veil net, I'm going to draw it till I get half of my waist or round body measurement. Then I'll draw the other side till I get half of my round body measurements plus 1 inch for our zipper allowance. So that is 12.5 on one side, 12.5 on the other side. Next, I'm going to, for my satin now, I've rolled it down. I will also get the midpoint of my satin fabric. like so. Then I'm going to be drawing the gathers from the midpoint to one side and from the midpoint to the other side, making sure what I have in total is my round body measurement. So I've done my pieces now with the lining, after which I just sewed the lining in place. So the lining and the lace becomes one. Then I'm going to be closing up my pinning now. After pinning, I'll mark out my zipper allowance of 1 inch. Then I'm going to sew it down using loose stitches because we're still going to be losing that part. After which I'm also going to be pinning the sides. I'll pin the sides, then mark out our seam allowance of 1 inch also. Then I'm going to sew, but I won't be using loose stitches for the sides. I'll be using normal stitches for joining the side. So I'm marking out our sewing allowance here. Then I'm going to sew it close. I'll also close up the shoulder. I'll pin it, the front and the back shoulder. I'll pin it, then sew using 1/2 inch. So now I've drawn my gathers for the satin fabric, and what I'm supposed to have in total is supposed to be my waist measurement plus 2 inches for zipper allowance. Now I've also drawn the gathers for the veil net. I'm going to place this now midpoint to midpoint. I'll pin, then I'll take it to my machine and sew the both of them together. I'll sew them together. Next, I'm going to be getting the midpoint of my lace fabric too, but I can't run a gathers on this because of how thick the lace fabric is. So what I'll be doing instead is to pin the midpoints together. Then from the beginning of the lace, as I'm sewing, I'll be putting the lace into the machine as I'm sewing. As I'm sewing, I'll just be pushing the lace, making sure everything enters. Next, I'm going to be cutting out my sleeve. So this is not very visible, so I will just be explaining this because the chalk was not reflecting. So I'm working with a sleeve length of 11 inches and an armhole curve of 5 inches. The round sleeve I'm working with is 4 inches plus 1 inch for seam allowance. Then the 3/4, the hem of the sleeve is 7 inches, which is 3.5 plus 1 inch for seam allowance. So I'm going to connect the points together and cut out. And I said I'm working with an armhole curve of 5 inches plus 1 inch for seam allowance. That's 6. So the top is 6. The round sleeve I'm working with is 8. That's 5. Then the down is 4.5. So I've closed up the sides of my upper part now. I'll be attaching my sleeve to the upper part. So to measure what I have here, you can see I have 5 inches for my armhole curve. But when I measure what's on the blouse, it's not up to 5. I'm having 4. So I want there should be ease around the armhole for the baby. So I'm going to be cutting it down from that side. I'm cutting it to 5 inches. 4 inches will be small for the size I'm working with. So depending on the size we are working with. So I'm going to cut it down to widen it. Then when I measure what I have now, I think I have about 5 inches there. Okay, I have 5 inches. So I'm going to be fixing my sleeve now to this upper part. I have 5 inches on the other side also. So before I fix my sleeve, I will be opening up my seam allowance so I can join my lower parts to the upper parts now. I'm going to chalk the midpoint of my upper part, and look at how beautiful our lower part came out. Very nice, very demure. So I'm going to be attaching the upper part now, and I'll be attaching it midpoint of the upper part to the midpoint of the lower part. So I'm just going to enhance the midpoint there. Then I'm going to be sewing it. So you can see that it's exactly what I have on the waistline of the upper part. That's what I'm having on the waistline of the lower part. I'm going to be sewing this using 1/2 inch. I'll pin the midpoint, then take it to my machine and sew using 1/2 inch, after which I attach my sleeve. Okay, so this is it. Look at this dress, is given already. So next, now I'm going to be closing up my zipper allowance again. I'm going to be pinning it down. Then from the half length where there's joining on the waist, I'm going to be pinning to about 5 inches below the half length. So I'm going to properly arrange all the layers of fabric on that side. I'm going to mark our seam allowance of 1 inch. Then from that point, I measured 5 inches. And I marked our seam allowance also. So I'm going to be sewing with loose stitches from the top to that point, that 5 inches point. Then I'm going to top stitch at that point. So this is our dress here, and I've sewn it to that 5 inches point. I've top stitched there. So now I'm going to be notching that point so that we can continue sewing the remaining part of the dress. I'm going to notch, and you can see how wide my notch is, but be careful not to notch the thread. So where my sewing stops, that's where I'm going to be notching, but I'll make sure I don't cut through the thread. Then I'm going to open up the lower part this way, then pick it lace fabric to lace fabric. Then from where the sewing stops, from where the joining stop, I'll start sewing there and sew 1 inch. I'll push the lace inside and pick veil net to veil net. I'll sew 1 inch there. I'll start sewing from the tip there to 1 inch all the way. Then I'll push it in, close up my satin fabric, and sew using 1 inch all the way to the hem. Now this is possible. It's possible to push it in because we notched properly. So be careful not to cut your thread, but notch very close to it. So this method here is how you sew a baby dress. It helps all the fabrics to flow individually. So when the baby turns around, all the fabrics can turn individually and come out very beautiful. So this is me now pinning this all the way. That is, if we sewed this straight and we didn't do it the way I said we should do it. If we pin it straight, so I'm going to turn it over, assuming we've sewn it this way, you can see what we're having here. All the fabrics are restricted. It will not flow. This is not how you finish this part here. So this is, by the time the baby turns around, that part will not turn. It will make all the fabrics just bunch together at the back. So that is not how you do it, and you do it the first way I said we should do it. So this is what we have. You can see all the fabrics are independent. The lace is separate from the veil net and separate from the satin. I hope you understand that. So now for the cape, I want to cut out our cape, and I want the cape to be 2 inches long at the front and 6 inches long at the back. The cape is going to be climbing the bishop collar, so I want the length to be 6 inches at the back. So I'm going to be cutting out the pattern for it. I'll just get a straight line here. Then I'm going to be marking my 1 inch for zipper allowance, after which I'll be marking the length of the cape, which is 18 inches, plus 1/2 inch sewing allowance, which is 18.5 inches. So all I have there now is 19.5. I'll just mark it up also. I'll draw out a straight line. So this is going to be my center back and my front. Now for my center back, I said I want it to be 6 inches long, plus seam allowance, half inch seam allowance on the top and the bottom, that's 7 inches. For the center front, I want it to be 2 inches plus seam allowance of half inch on both sides, that's 3 inches. I'll be connecting it like so. I'll connect the lines together, then I'm going to cut out. So this pattern here has all the allowance we'll be needing. I've added allowance to sew the upper part and the lower part. So now I've cut out a piece of my fabric. I've ironed collar stay on one side, on the door side of one part, and I've ironed air stay on one part of the door side also. So I'm going to fold the fabric now into two for both the left and the right structure. And I'm marking the up and the down. I'm placing my pattern on the fabric now. So this fabric that has air stay is going to be the front, if the main fabric, while the one that has collar stay is going to be the lining. So I'm going to be cutting out. I'm cutting out two of these. So I added half inch at the tip there, in case we have a shortage or so. So I can always trim this out. So I've cut out the same thing for the collar stay two also. And I'm labeling the up of the pattern and the up of the structure and the down of the structure. So by the time we arrange it, this is what we'll be having. We'll be having something like this. So you can see it's coming together already. Next, I'm going to be cutting out a strip of fabric of about 1.5 inch. I'm going to be creating boning channels on this structure, and I'm going to be creating it on the pieces with the collar stay, which is the lining. I'm going to be sewing this half inch after the tip of the fabric, as you can see, and the boning channel is going to be half inch wide. So I'm going to be sewing it, making sure I don't sew on the half inch where I'm going to be using for my sewing allowance. So after my half inch sewing allowance, I'll be sewing my boning channel on both the top and the bottom, and this is what we have. And I've also gone ahead to sew the sides with half inch. So I'm trimming out the excess seam allowance. Then I'm going to turn out my structure now. So you can see how it is. After turning it out, I'm going to be ironing it so it lays properly, and this is what I have after ironing. You can see my boning channels also. Now I've cut out a piece of fabric which is 9 inches long. I'll be attaching this to my veil net. So on fold, I'm having 4.5 inches. I'll be sewing half inch up and I'll be attaching it to my veil net. Because my veil net, I cut a length of 15 inches instead of 19 inches. So I made our veil net short with 4 inches because I'll be adding this 4 inches of satin to complete the length. So I'll sew this round the hem of my dress, after which I'm going to be opening up my zipper allowance I sewed on the neckline so I can take my round neck measurement. So I'm going to carefully take this round neck measurement so we can cut our bishop collar for the dress. I'll take it around and I have 13.5 inches. Now I'm going to be folding my paper like a triangle, like so. Then I'm going to, since it don't fold, that means I'm going to be having 13.5 on fold. I'm going to mark that. I'll mark that. When I'm done marking, I'm going to measure it till I have 6.75. So if I don't have 6.75 there, I'll just go up again. So I had more than 6.75 there, so I'll just go up. I'll now mark 8 inches down. After measuring what I have there, I have my 6.75 inches. So from that point now, I'm going to be going up. I want my collar to be 1.25 inches long plus half inch seam allowance, that's 1.75. So I'll be adding it. I'll be marking 1.75 up. Then I'll also be adding seam allowance on the down that I'll be using to join to our dress. So I'm marking the half inch seam allowance also. Then I'm going to cut out. After cutting out, I'm going to cut this out on my fabric, and I'm ironing air stay on this. So this is what I have. I've cut out 2 pieces of fabric and I ironed air stay on both. I'm taking out my pattern now, and then I'm going to be sewing the top of the fabric here with half inch. After which I'll turn it over, iron it, then fix it to my blouse. I will fix this how we usually fix the band of our trouser or skirt. But I also went ahead to add 1 inch to that collar because it's a baby dress we're making. We don't want it to be too firm on the neck. So this is how we're going to be attaching our structure to the hem from the top of our collar, like so. Then I'll also be attaching my zipper to this, and this is what we have. So for the lining, I'm working with 1 yard of hard net and 1 yard of lining. So for my lining now, I'm cutting out 17 inches long for our lining, and our lining is about 58 inches long. Then the depth is 17 inches. So I'm getting the midpoint of my lining here. I'm going to make it visible. Then I'm going to be sewing gather stitches or loose stitches at the top, half inch. Then from that half inch where I sewed my gather stitches, I'll be coming down with 2 inches and I'll mark it all the way to the end. So I'll mark 2 inches from the half inch point. So it's from that 2 inches our hard net is going to start from. Now I folded my hard net, and I'm also going to be cutting out 11 inches for our hard net. So our hard net is not supposed to be longer than our lining, and our hard net is about 72 inches long, then 17 inches wide, then the length is 11 inches. So I'm dividing my lining now into 3 because I cut out 3 of my hard net. So 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to make sure each piece of my hard net fools just one part. So I'm going to be pleating. I'm making pleats on my lining, making sure that the whole of this net ends at the first layer. Then the second layer, I'll take another hard net and pleat till I get to the end of the second layer. Then the third layer, I get another hard net and pleat, and I make sure everything enters, and I'll have to make it align. So you can see how it is. You can see that it is aligning. So if we put too much hard net on one part than the other part, it's going to reflect on our dress. One side is going to be higher than one, so it needs to be even. Try to make it as even as possible. So I'm going to be drawing out my gathers now. I'll be drawing it till I get my waist measurements. Now for my dress, I'm going to be making the midpoint visible. Then I'll be placing the midpoint of my lining piece on this. So if we place our lining like this, the net is going to be touching the skin of the baby, and we don't want that. So this is how our dress is supposed to be. So we place it this way, then flip it over. Then pick the midpoint of the lining to the midpoint of the dress. So whatever we do, we make sure the net does not touch the skin of the baby. So we'll pick it like this and sew half inch. So this is what we have. after sewing that part. Now to finish this zipper side, to close it up, please watch carefully how I'm doing this. I will take my lining up, then turn it again like so. I'll turn it like this, then pick it with the zipper allowance where I fixed my zip, and I'm going to sew on that point. I'll sew and stop where I stopped my zipper, where I stopped sewing my zipper. So I'm explaining it again. I'll move my lining up, then turn it the other way. Like I want to turn it back, but it's going around the zipper allowance. Then I'm going to be sewing, and I'm going to stop sewing where the zipper stops. So this is what I have, you can see, and I stopped sewing it where I stopped sewing my zip also. Now to close up this side, I'm going to making sure I make it. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is to pick the two, both the hard net and the lining of the both sides, and sew about 2 inches long. I'll pick all the pieces of the lining and the net together, and I'm going to sew it from the top there. I'll sew it with 2 inches. After sewing with 2 inches, I'm going to be notching like I did for the main bodice of the dress. After sewing with 2 inches, I'm going to be notching very close to the thread, but make sure I don't cut the thread. So I'll sew, then top stitch, then I'm going to notch. After notching now, I'm going to be sewing, moving my hard net out of the way, then sew my lining. After sewing my lining now, I'll push my lining in, then sew my hard net, the 2 hard nets together, so that everything runs separately. So I've sewn my lining now, then I'll sew my hard net. Next, I'm going to be deciding how I want my cape to be, and I'm okay with this length. I'll just be cutting out that initial ½ inch I added. I don't think it was necessary. So if I sew it down with ½ inch like so, I'm just checking at this point. I'm just checking if I'm okay with how wide the structure is. So assuming I've sewn it, I pinned it down and I place it on my neck. I'm checking if I'm okay with the structure, and I think this is fine. So I'm going to take out my pins now, and I'm going to be inserting my boning to the structure. I'm going to be working with a 0.25 inch Regling boning, very small Regling boning. Then I'll be inserting it inside the boning channel I created on the lining piece of the structure. I'm going to insert it. Make sure it goes all the way to the end. After that, I'll cut it out. Then I'll reduce about 1 inch away from the boning so I can sew that part. I'm going to insert it into the second line. I'll cut it and I'll cut that part. Then I'll do that for the second structure. You can see how it's standing already. So I've done that for the second structure now. I'm going to be closing up with ½ inch, after which I'll trim off the excess allowance, then place it on the center of our blouse and sew on that joining line. So after sewing, this is what I have, and this is it. Now for the bow at the back of our dress, I cut 2 pieces of fabric of 9 inches by 9 inches, and also this small fabric of 7 inches by 3.5 inches. I'm going to be marking the back of this fabric, that is the door side of the fabric. Then I'm going to be ironing my collar stay on one piece and my hair stay on the other piece. I'll also be ironing my hair stay on this small piece I have here. After ironing, I'll be placing the two on each other and be sewing with ½ inch or 0.25 inches all round, and also on the small piece also. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to be separating the two fabrics, but I'll be cutting on the side that has the collar stay, because the side that has the collar stay is our lining part that's going to be at the back. So I'm going to force out my pattern. I'll turn it over to the right way from that hole. So please, the hole should not be too wide and just enough for you to turn out. I'll turn out this small piece also, after which I'm going to iron it out properly, and this is what we have. Now to close up this hole, I'll be putting my hemming glue there, hemming gum there, and I'll iron it down. So you can see the hole has sealed up. I'll just be getting the midpoint of this fabric here so I can pleat my bow. So this is how I achieved my bow. Then I'll be placing this smaller piece. The side that has the joining will be facing up. Then I'm going to sew here on my machine. After sewing, I'll be cutting off the excess allowance. Now when sewing, this should not be too tight, so that we will have to turn it over inside out, so that the rough finishing is inside, and you can see what we have here. So this is our dress, guys. It came out very fine, very beautiful, very demure, very classy, and see you in my next video. Thanks for watching.